Welcome to the Joy Meets Pain podcast. I'm your host, Dorcas. As a family therapist, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard people say, my family is the worst, or I'm too embarrassed to talk about my family, or no family is like mine. Well, guess what, listeners? All families have ishness, foolishness, happiness, shadiness, loneliness, forgiveness, hopefulness, goodness, and the list goes on. If you come from a family, like we all do, and are trying to navigate your family relationships, then welcome. Here's an important disclaimer. I am not providing therapy or medical advice. Please consult with your medical and mental health providers. And here's a heads up. Once in a while, I will curse. So if you're looking for a clean, no foul language kind of show, this is not it. Join me and my co-host Taki mid-month and end of the month on Wednesdays as we discuss all things family, both joyful and painful. Welcome to the Joy Meets Pain podcast. This is episode 43, and it is called The World Cup, Wimbledon, and the Polygamist. What do they have in common? All right, so hopefully by the end of this episode, you will catch on to the theme of these topics, right? So most of you know by now, I'm a huge sports fan. Not all sports, most of them evolved from basketball once upon a time. Tennis has always been a thing. And how can I resist football or soccer, as we call it here in the US. But the World Cup is going on. There's so much happening. It's such an emotional roller coaster. OMG. Not just for myself, but watching the fans, the players, the coaches. It's a lot. It's just such an intense, tense, a sport to watch. And I am just watching every minute I can possibly get. I think I might take a break a day or two. I don't know, but it's been a lot. So, all right. Where do we begin with the World Cup? I mean, firstly, there's a lot happening. Who's won, who's lost, how they're winning, how they're losing. But one thing that I try to pay attention to is disparities in salaries and countries and access. So, if we compare, let's say, England versus Mexico, a player in the English Premier League typically earns 6 to 10 times more than a player in the Liga Mexican League, right? So you can imagine what this means for players coming from smaller countries, countries that do, places that do not have the same access, right? But anyway, I mean, FIFA itself is way more than just football. It is passion, it's patriotism, it's celebration, right? But it's also a reminder that the playing field is not always equal, right? Athletes from wealthy, powerful nations are trained in the best facilities, and they're often competing against athletes from smaller countries or countries where they have fewer resources. But yes, for those of you who are watching, I hope you're taking it all in and, having the lens that I have. I'm always thinking about the families and the sacrifices that these athletes make, get to the level that they get to play at. And also just seeing the disappointment when loss happens. And, again, those who have to go back to their hometowns where maybe they're not as celebrated or life has to continue. So always looking at the systemic aspect of any sport, actually. All right, so now I am going to jump to tennis. And of course, I will talk about Wimbledon. Well, first and foremost, number 14, Naomi Osaka from Japan beat Ariana Sabalenka. And so rooting for Osaka. I mean, I talk about her as often as I can, but one of the things about her that really appeals to me is her authenticity and how she shows up being who she is no matter where she is, right? And this comes out in the outfits that she wears, right? So Wimbledon, we know it's known for tradition and being conservative and sort of uncompromising when it comes to rules and dress code. Naomi showed up with an outfit designed by Tokyo-based designer Hana Yagi, which was an honor to her Japanese heritage. But it just brings me so much joy to see her just, this is who I am. And I'm not shying away from that. I think it's so empowering, especially for younger players who observe and watch her. And for all of us, for all of us, who would not want to show up day in and day out as their true self, right? And so watching her, at every tournament that she plays, but this in particular reminded me of the Crown Act. Now, some of you who are not in the US might not be familiar with what this is, but this is actually a policy that was put in place. So it came about in 2019, right? Because Black and brown people were experiencing discrimination in the workplace based on their hairstyles and hair texture and how we show up, right? So CROWN actually stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. Now, who would have thought that we needed a law to prevent discrimination because of our hair? Well, hey, this is the world we live in, right? So, not surprisingly, not all the states in the US have adopted this into law. 30 states have passed it, 20 have not. On the list, not surprising, Montana, the Dakotas, Alabama, Mississippi, right? So, again, it says a lot, but hopefully if you're catching on to my theme, right? I started with the World Cup. Oh, by the way, how can I forget the most important aspect of the World Cup? Okay, so the red card reversal. Do I need to say more? Okay, Belgium won 4-2-1. All right, so red card reversal. Okay, so FIFA, power, I talked about the countries, income disparities, tennis, Osaka showing up as her true self, right? Again, people in power putting the rules in place for dress codes. We only wear white here, right? Sort of to keep things prestigious, right? Yeah, I'll leave it at that. So now I was talking about the Crown Act. Again, people in power, using these laws or decisions that they make to kick kids out of school because their hair is distracting or it doesn't look professional. And of course, I hear these stories all the time. I have lived this life, so I completely can relate to it. And so the last topic I did tell you, the World Cup, Wimbledon, and the Polygamist. So thank you to my lovely cousins who brought this show into my attention, because I live in a box. I didn't know this thing was happening, right? And yes, I was watching, first and foremost, I don't need to say more. It's been around for quite a while, this show on Netflix, and it's based on a book by a Zimbabwean author, aren't we proud? And her name is Sukolule well, she goes by Sunyati, but it's Sukolule Nyati, right? This was actually her first book, and she decided right before she turned 40, you know what, let me pursue my true passion and love for writing, what she did, and look where she is now, right? But this story is also, again, about power, about control, about abuse, about dominance, submission, right? It's an intense, provocative drama. And Sue herself said when she received the episodes to watch, she tried to watch just the first two, and she was going to pace herself, but she ended up watching like 10 in one day. And I think everyone who's watched this has said the same thing. We went through the same thing over here as well. I was like, oh my God, I just can't wait to see what's going to happen next. Let's just jump into the next episode, right? So, yes, I mean, there's you have to watch it. If you haven't, please do, because it's more than just polygamy. It's about love and how it is, the main character, Jonasi, and, Sukolule herself says he does not know how to love, which we can clearly see, right? But unfortunately, his definition of love is similar to many other men, people out there, So it's more than just that, but it's also seeing how, again, people who are in need compromise their values just to have access to things that they may not have, right? So the characters are fascinating. I mean, I think you can pretty much make a movie out of each character. But again, from my worldview, what I pay attention to is how are the children impacted, right? Because this is something I preach to the choir on a regular basis is, and how are your children reacting to this, right? Because, parents are busy, they're overwhelmed, they have their own trauma, and oftentimes they are unaware or inattentive to the impact on children of decisions that they made. So if you want to see, I mean, I was watching the Engineer Your Life podcast, which is hosted by Lugelo. And this is where he was interviewing Sukolule. And she just dropped so many gems in this interview. So many, so many. For one, she talked about her decision to pursue writing after working for decades as a business analyst, right? And she talked about how jobs can become a comfort zone or a trap. I have mentioned this in previous episodes as well, that jobs can kill people, and they do, right? We fight through these workplace stressors, and it takes a toll, physical and mental. And so it was just great to hear her saying, pursue your passion, right? Because she actually said you can be good at something, but it might not be what you're called to do, right? So if you feel like you have a passion, pursue that passion, right? She also talked about why she thinks the show has been such a hit, and it's because people want to be seen. People want to be seen. And I know this, I see this, everyone wants to be seen. And this show has given people that space to see themselves, see others, right? It's also about people who've been oppressed or are in pain, right? And she made this excellent point of how can you pour into someone else if you're not able to pour into yourself? If you cannot love yourself, how do you think you can love someone else? And so we see this in many of the characters in the show as well. And she also said, we see the fruit, but let's deal with the roots, right? So we see the fruits at the top, but let's dig deeper to the roots of where the fruit came from. And this is psychotherapy. This is pretty much what we are striving to do, right? So I think I'm gonna start wrapping up here. So if you figured out by now, my theme for today is all about power control, right? How power can be used, misused. And so looking at the World Cup, this red card reversal, looking at tennis and just loving how Osaka stood, to her values and beliefs and showed up as who she was, right? So when we think about power and control, we usually think about them in politics and positions of leadership, but they're woven into nearly every part of our lives, right? We see them in government, schools, friendships, workplaces, intimate relationships with our own families, right? So sometimes they are used to protect and empower, but oftentimes they are used to silence and exclude or even cause harm. And the effects can last for generations, right? So in family systems, it is important to recognize how this is showing up, right? So if we think about this red card reversal in soccer, right? The debate now has been going on about authority, right? Fairness, you know, can you question those in power, right? And I've talked about the Crown Act, right? So when we think about the dress code in workplaces and in schools, right, while they may have good intentions, but they do become tools that are used to exclude people, especially those who are disadvantaged, right? This is pretty much what it is here. But imagine just what it would feel like to be able to show up as your authentic self every day, all the time, everywhere, and not have to worry about, do I fit in? Do I look right? Is my hair texture or hairstyle not intimidating to other people? Right. And in our families, then, this is where most of us have our first experiences of power and exposure to it, right? So, parents and caregivers, meanwhile, they make decisions that are based on their own experiences, right? But when there is that unresolved trauma or fear or pain, it is going to be passed down, right? So they can unintentionally leave these wounds, and children will carry them into adulthood. And I think we see that in the Polygamist very well, freedom and his rage, and Sarah, his sister, as well. All right, so it's not even that power is the problem, right? But it's how we use it that matters, right? Power can work hand in hand with responsibility and advocacy and fairness and leadership, right? So that is always the hope that those in power, will use it to help and not to hurt. All right, so in closing, I want to leave you with a few questions. Where do you have power in your life? And how are you using it? Are you helping others to grow, or are you controlling them? And if you are on the receiving end of someone's power, does it leave you feeling respected, valued, or small, fearful, unheard? Again, power and control come in many shapes and sizes. And the question is, what kind of impact is yours having? Thank you, as always, for joining me. If you do not subscribe, please do. I look forward to meeting you in the next episode. I hope this episode added something meaningful to your life. If you have a family-related story, whether joyful or painful, that you would like to share, please send an email to info@joymeetspain.com or post a comment or find us on Instagram and Facebook. If you or any family member has ever said, "Our family is crazy," we want to have you on our show. Thank you for tuning in and for allowing us to spend this part of your day with you. Please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen to the show. And of course, subscribe and spread the word. Till next time, stay well and stay present.